All right, so I want to let you know what our plan is. We have an hour and a half together, and what we're doing in our time together this afternoon is digging into the SASH participation forms. And there are 4 of these forms that when you're signing people on, you're going to be going through. Primarily, it's going to be the SASH coordinators that are signing up folks as SASH participants, but there have absolutely been times where it's a wellness nurse, or we even have times where it's just a member of the SASH team, whether it's a AAA representative or a home care nurse from the home health agency that has an existing relationship with someone and says, you know what, let me take the paperwork and I'll walk it through with my client and get them to sign up. So it's great to have the basics about participating in SASH. So we're going to definitely dig into those forms so to help you really kind of understand what's entailed in them and give you an opportunity to ask questions about them. Before we dig right into those, though, I want to do a bit of a review around kind of the basics of participating in SASH, and I want to go through what the funding sources are, who can participate, what do we mean by a SASH panel. You'll hear us referring to a full panel or a half panel, so I just really want to make sure you guys are grounded in that. And then I want to just go over the kind of continuum of support that SASH provides, so it's helpful for you all to have that understanding that there's this whole kind of continuum of services that is available to a participant, and at different times in their participation they may be on one end of that continuum and other times another. So I just want to make sure you have that. So we'll go through that, and then we'll go through each of these 4 forms that you're going to have to go through with folks when you're signing them up. What is the module that focuses on the basics of participation? So Module 9 is where you want to, that's really your reference for what we're training on today. And I want to start off this training on, getting people to participate in SASH by saying that, this is the very first part of you implementing the SASH model, is when you first meet with people, they're describing to them what SASH is, and we're walking through these 4 forms, and this is right when you immediately set the tone about SASH being a person-centered model. So right from the get-go, and the way you're doing that when you're going through participation forms with them and having them sign them is that you're meeting with them one-on-one. If that's what they're looking for. There's certainly some people that are fine, being in a small group and hearing about it and signing up right away. That's fine. But you're also going to have people that want to sit down with you one-on-one. So you want to make time for that. You want to make time to really explain what SASH is. And one of these forms we're going to go through walks you through that with your participant. You want to listen to their questions. You want to be thoughtful in how you answer them. You want to be thinking about, making sure that you're offering to the person, we're going to go through these participation forms. Is there family or friend or a close friend that you would like to be there with you as we go through this? So really making sure that you're present with them, that you're prepared for your time to go through this participation, these participation documents will really set the tone from the beginning that SASH is a person-centered model. So I like to start off with this slide just as a reminder, and just to make the point that it starts right from the get-go. I wanted to start off with funding sources, because I think it's important as being SASH staff that you understand where our funding is coming from and how who participates in SASH is impacted by how we're funded. So we talked a couple weeks ago about the fact that it's primarily a Medicare funding source that provides the funding for SASH. And what we basically have are primarily these 2 funding sources for SASH. We have the Medicare-funded MAPCP. So I'm going to tell you what MAPCP is. It is the Multi-Payer Advanced Primary Care Practice Demonstration. That is just the name of the demonstration that the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services came up with. But actually, the primary funding source is the Medicare dollars that are coming through this demonstration. SASH also ends up being funded by existing revenue and grant sources that a housing host organization adds to the equation. So they're bringing down SASH Medicare funds from this demonstration, but a housing organization that decides to provide SASH at their building and to people out in the community, if they have existing resources, those also have to be in the mix. They can't be taken out because, oh, now we have Medicare demonstration funds. That was one thing that Medicare was very clear about, that Medicare funds needed to add on to whatever funding for services the housing organization had in place. So those I think are important things to understand. Those are the primary funding sources. There are some other small grants, foundation support, but this, for your purposes, I think this is the most important thing to know at this point. Okay, so what is it exactly that Medicare, the demonstration funds, are paying for with SASH? So the quick and dirty answer there is that the Medicare funds are basically paying for two groups of participants. It's any Medicare beneficiary that is living in the SASH hub site. So when I say SASH hub site, what I'm talking about is, and I'm just going to talk about somebody that's on the phone. So I know Deerfield Valley. Is it Becky? Becky, are you the one in Deerfield Valley?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So in Deerfield Valley, I know that you have an office in Butterfield Commons, which is an affordable housing site that's owned by a nonprofit organization, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the SASH hub site for your panel is Butterfield Commons. So and so everybody on the line has some kind of affordable housing building of some sort that is kind of the hub site of the SASH activity. You're still going to be providing SASH outside of that congregate site, but there is a affordable housing organization that has decided to implement SASH, and therefore, you're hired, and then there's a wellness nurse that's either hired or contracted for. So, so the Medicare funds are going to fund any of the Medicare beneficiaries who are living in that SASH hub site. That's pretty obvious. But then the Medicare funds also will fund any Medicare beneficiary that's living out in the community, so not part of the congregate building, outside of that SASH hub. So the key thing is that the Medicare demonstration funds are funding Medicare folks. Those funds really can't be used to fund people that are non-Medicare. Medicare demonstration funds are paying for a full-time SASH coordinator and a roughly a quarter-time wellness nurse. So we talked about the Medicare demonstration funds as one of the sources. The other sources we talked about was any existing revenue sources or grant funds that the housing host organization has. So the question is, what are those sources paying for? If Medicare is paying for the Medicare folks that make up your SASH panel, what is it that existing revenue sources and grant funds are paying for? Well, there's a couple things. The first is that it's very possible that within that SASH hub site, so let's say like at Butterfield Commons, for instance, that there are some people that are living there that aren't on Medicare. There's affordable housing is funded by lots of different funding sources, and I know some federal sources for senior housing actually have an age cutoff of 55 or older. Well, Medicare, you have to be 65. So you can absolutely have people living in affordable senior housing around the state that are not Medicare eligible, even though they're in senior housing, because the funding for the senior housing, the cutoff is age 55. So it's very possible that you're going to have some folks in your housing hub site, congregate building, that are not on Medicare. And you're very likely going to want to serve them because they're in your building and you have SASH there. And so if your housing organization has existing funding sources that they've gotten over time, and some of these include, and you might have heard of some of these. Housing and Supportive Services, that's a HOS grant, that's a state-funded grant. There's also a federal HUD grant called Resident Opportunity and Self-Sufficiency, that's the ROS grant. And then there's Housing and Urban Development HUD Resident Services grant. So a lot of the housing organizations that implement SASH do have these other grant sources that they've used to provide services of one kind or the other. And since those aren't going away with the addition of the Medicare demonstrations funds for SASH, that should provide enough extra funding to be able to provide SASH to anyone in your building, even if they are not a Medicare beneficiary. Before I get to that, though, I want to just make the point that if you have someone out in the community that's interested in participating in SASH, they do, in fact, have to be a Medicare beneficiary. It's only the people in your building where you may have, grant sources from your housing organization that can serve them that you could provide SASH to if they were not on Medicare. But if you have people out in the community that you're getting referrals on that want to join SASH, they have to be on Medicare. You're going to need to rely on the Medicare dollars through this demonstration to provide SASH to them. Your housing organization is in no way going to be able to use the housing services funds they got for the residents in their building to serve people outside of their building. So that's a really key point, is that any community, what we call community participants, those living outside of your housing hub site, have to be Medicare beneficiaries. So next thing I want to go through with you all is to help you understand kind of what a panel really means out in the real world. So let's just say, since I'm picking on Butterfield Commons here in Deerfield Valley, let's say that we have Butterfield Commons, which has 24 residents that live in this affordable housing property. And what the housing organization knows is that of those 24 residents, 19 are actually Medicare enrollees. And the housing organization has decided to, because of the smaller size of their building, have decided, we're not going to do a full panel of 100. We're going to actually do a half panel. So Medicare does allow us to draw down funds for panels of 50. And so what that means, if you have a half panel, what you're going to draw down is funds for a half-time SASH coordinator and actually an eighth of a time wellness nurse, which is about 5 hours a week of wellness nursing. So this particular housing organization said, I have 24 residents living in my small congregate setting, so we're gonna start a half panel. So they figured out that of their 24 residents, 19 of them were enrolled in Medicare, and they had 5 residents that were non-Medicare. So what's important here is that at the end of the day, because Medicare is funding a half panel of SASH, at the end of the day, we got to have 50 Medicare beneficiaries. So what that means in this particular situation is that it ends up that the majority of this, of Butterfield Commons here, this is just an example, the majority of their participants are going to end up being community participants because they only have 19 Medicare residents in their actual hub site. So in this situation, when, let's say we're 6 months later, and what we have, the SASH coordinator has been busy building this panel, and at the end of the day, what they have is they got all 19 of their Medicare participants to join SASH, so they have 19 Medicare that are living in the hub site. They have those 5 that are non-Medicare, and this organization had a HOS grant, so they said, okay, let's definitely offer SASH to my non-Medicare residents because I have some existing funding. And then they had to reach out to 31 other participants, Medicare participants, out in the community. So in this particular situation, this half panel, when you add up all the numbers, actually comes out to 55. But Medicare demonstration funds are funding those 50 Medicare people, the 19 in the housing hub site and the 31 outside in the community. So I wanted to just kind of walk through that just so you get a sense that, sometimes these panels, there's quite a variety of, kind of in-house versus out in the community versus insurance type. And so some of you may be in panels that are very similar to that. is the continuum of support and services. And I just wanted to underscore, and we went through this a bit when we met a couple weeks ago, but that SASH is really this continuum of support and services. And the point is that the intensity of SASH support and services is really going to vary, because it's going to depend on what the participants' needs are, what the participants' desires are, kind of what situation the participant finds themselves in. And so, the full spectrum of SASH services and supports and benefits that we can provide will require this signed consent and waiver form that we're going to go through in a few minutes. We're going to dig into that. But there's also kind of automatic benefit and supports that a person can get if they're not interested at this point in signing those two forms. So what I do is I just give an example on this slide of some of the different supports and services that SASH provides. So it's one-on-one time with a SASH coordinator, getting some generalized referrals to partner organizations, wellness seminars, evidence-based programs that are real series, 6-week series, 8-week series, those kinds of things. Wellness nurse visits. These can happen on a varying frequency rate. So if you have someone that is just coming home from the hospital, it could be that the wellness nurse is going to check in on them once a week. Other people, maybe they're set up on a once every 2 weeks or once a month kind of face-to-face. Again, it's going to depend on your participant. So that's why this continuum is there. Other example of the support and services that we provide is this team meeting, this care coordination through the team meeting, where all of your team members are going to come together on a monthly basis to action plan and coordinate for some of your participants that need that kind of support. And then another example is just the discharge planning, the visits and the communication that you'll be able to have with your team members and with the families and friends and support persons. So there's a real variety of support and services. And my next slide, just for those of you that are visual learners, provides more of a visual of this continuum. So down along the, is this the x-axis or the y-axis? Who can remember? Who took algebra? I think it's the x-axis along the bottom. These are just the examples, again, of the different supports and services. And, the ones that are kind of on the left-hand side, the one-on-one SASH coordinator referrals and meetings, the community healthy living plan programs. This is your kind of wellness programs and evidence-based programs. These kinds of supports here at the lower end, you can provide those to people in your hub site even if they're not interested in signing the 2 participation forms that they would need to sign to get access to the full benefits. Because for people that only want to participate at that level, there's no sharing of information that's required. They're not going to be talked about at the SASH team meeting. They're not going to be assessed by the nurse. There's not going to be private health information that's exchanged. So that's why there is this ability to provide kind of this automatic low-level benefit to SASH participants that live in your housing hub site that aren't interested in signing on the forms to have access to the full benefits. But once you get to these higher level, kind of go further up on my line here, you have things like the assessment. The SASH assessment gets completed. HLP is the Healthy Living Plan. That's the individualized plan that you all will do with participants. You also have transitions planning and communication, SASH team meetings. I keep losing my mouse. Sorry about that. There it is. Wellness nurse visits. So it's all of these services on the continuum that will absolutely require a consent to be signed by your potential participants as well as a waiver form. So that's just another way to explain how the services and the supports will vary. And the fact of the matter is where a particular participant is at one time or another will change over time. They may be extremely needy for a while because they've just had surgery and are just kind of getting back on their feet at home, so they're requiring a lot of one-on-one and needing a lot of check-ins. And then 2 or 3 weeks go by, and they're really back in their groove. And so suddenly maybe the weekly wellness nurse visits aren't necessary anymore. And that kind of ebb and flow is really, you're going to find it's necessary because you're going to need to have the time to be flexible to move on to another person that maybe is in a more acute situation. So what you'll find over time is that the needs within your panel, the individual needs, will change, and that's really a good thing. And that's the model we expect that with this model. What we're going to do now is go ahead and dig into the SASH participation forms. So you'll see I've switched over here, and you're going to see the slide that says SASH documents for access to the full benefit. So again, what I'm talking about here is that in order for SASH to provide the fullest amount of support, we want folks to sign these forms so that they do have access to the full benefit. That's kind of what we call it, the full benefit. So there are 4 forms that you need to go through when you're meeting with potential participants. Only 2 of them actually need signatures. So we're going to go through all 4 of them, but I just wanted to highlight that it's only 2 that actually need signatures. And I'm going to show you where to find these forms easily. They're all up on the SASH forum, which is part of our SASH website. So we're going to go and grab these forms, and we're going to walk through them. The other thing that I want to bring your attention to is that we also sent to you as part of your the email you got from us to register for this training are talking points for these SASH documents, these 4 legal documents. So hopefully you have that handy as well, because we've developed these talking points over time as we've gotten feedback from staff on what their best kind of tips for explaining these forms to their participants. So I think you'll find that talking points for SASH legal documents a really helpful resource to have, and what I would recommend is that you just you have that form with you in your folder of documents that you're taking when you meet with your participants. You'll find it very, very handy. So let's go and grab the first form, and what you're going to want to start off with is the explanation of SASH benefits form. That's what you're going to, when you're going to meet with a potential participant, you're going to want to start with that one. So what I'm going to do is take you to where you would go get it. So I'm going to go to the SASH Vermont, SASH VT website. Okay, so I'm just going to do it right from the beginning. SASH Vermont, it'll pop up. And go to Support and Services at Home. There it is. Hopefully that looks familiar to you guys. I'm hoping you've been, since we were last together, kind of poking around here. So here's the SASH website. You want to go to SASH Resources and hit SASH Forum. Okay, and then here is where, as we've said before at our training, this is where all things for SASH staff reside. So we want to go to the SASH Operating Manual. And you'll note here that it says password required. So here we're going to click on the SASH Operating Manual. There we go. Okay, so it is SASH User. Great job. So I'm going to punch that in, hit Submit. Okay, and that's going to say Operating Manual. Click to open Manual and Resources. We're going to do that. We're going to click here for SASH Operating Manual. And as you guys remember, we're going to go to, there's a couple ways to do this, but I'm just going to go this way. Go to Module 9, which is the Participating in SASH manual module. And this is where you'll go. You can go to find these forms. You can also go to the Tools and Resources section that was right when it said click on the Operating Manual. Right below was all the tools and resources, and you'll find these 4 forms there alphabetized. But I wanted to go in here because I just want to remind you all that this module exists. So come down to the end of the page here. I think it's page 3. And looky there. We have the 4 forms. So you can just click right in here. We're going to start with the explanation of SASH benefits form. And what you see here is that it just downloaded it, and it went down to my taskbar, I guess is what this is called. So it's just a Word document. I hit on that. Comes up. Excellent. So here it is. It is a 2-page document. Let me just put this, hide that. Okay. And what you're going to want to do, what you'll see is this is a template. And so what you're going to need to do before you go and meet with your potential participants for the first time is you have to fill in the blanks. So you want to go grab this form. You have it. It's in a Word format. You want to save it to your computer system, whatever it is. You know, ours is called an S drive, but you have some kind of drive within your system at work where you get to save documents. So you're going to save as and explanation of SASH benefits. And what you need to do then is go through and fill in the blanks. So what you're going to be putting in here in this first paragraph are the names of the organizations that make up the SASH Collaborative. And that includes the housing organization that you work for. So in my situation, it's Cathedral Square, which is the name of the housing host. And then you're going to be putting in the names of the partner organizations that make up the collaborative. If you don't know who these organizations are, what you want to do is get a hold of your SASH Memorandum of Understanding, MOU. So you want to ask your supervisor, for that, because that lists all the partner organizations that make up the collaborative. So you're going to pull the names of those agencies from your MOU, and it's really good to have that anyway, because then you can make sure you're spelling the names right. Some of these organizations have some long names. So in my situation, it's Cathedral Square. The Home Health Agency is the Visiting Nurse Association of Chittenden and Grand Isle Counties. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to mess that name up. So if you have the actual MOU, you'll make sure you got that right. The Area Agency on Aging here is the Champlain Valley Agency on Aging, CVAA. Our mental health agency is Howard Center. And then if there were any other core partners listed in your MOU, you would put those on there. So use that document. And again, if you don't have it, you're not sure who these organizations are, talk to your supervisor. If your supervisor doesn't know, give me a call, and we'll get to the bottom of that. So, and you wouldn't be the first person to call me to say they don't know where their MOU is. So don't be worried about that. Okay, so that's the first thing you do is you want to fill in the blanks. And I should even say, like right from the beginning, it says name of SASH site. So for where we are right now up here, we're at Grandway Commons. So I know that their explanation of benefits says Grandway Commons SASH. And so you want to just fill that in for whatever the name of your SASH panel is. And so this is the form you're just going to walk through with your potential participant. And we tried to draft it in such a way that you can kind of speak it in a summary version. So you don't need to go and read this to them, but you have it. You can kind of spend some time with it beforehand and summarize it. So it starts off with just generally what does SASH provide, and then it tells them, the potential participants, to receive the full benefits of SASH, this is what you're going to have to do. And it's number one, they're going to have to consent to release information between these partners, and they're going to have to sign a waiver that releases that provides protection to the SASH partners for claims. They're also going, number two, talks about them participating in an assessment, working on a healthy living plan. So I don't need to read this to you all, but it's just letting, you can walk through it with your participant to say, this is what, we'll be working with you on as part of the SASH program. So it gives them a sense of kind of what SASH will be providing. And then it says, so that's kind of starting off by saying, this is what we're going to, this is what we're looking for from you. Time to get your assessment done, time to get a healthy living plan done, that kind of thing. And then Then the next section is says, by offering this program, the SASH partners are going to, and then it lists these things out. And again, the SASH partners are those organizations that were listed at the top. So it's the housing organization, the area agency on aging, the home health. And I think, I feel like it's really important right from the beginning to make sure your participants understand that this is a partnership program. That, those organizations that, they may very well know, quite well. They may have been getting Meals on Wheels for years through their AAA. So it's an organization that they know and respect. So if they understand that this SASH program is a partnership with those existing organizations, it's going to click more with them. So I think that it's helpful to really kind of walk through that these are the organizations that have been around in their regions for years and years that have come together to provide this new system. So that's what the next section is about, is explaining, what the SASH partners will do for them. That we're going to, we're going to do an assessment with them. We're going to provide evidence-based and promising programs. We're going to be able to get input, of course, with their consent. We're going to get input from the full team and do some action planning with them to help them remain at home. We're going to develop this individualized healthy living plan with them. We're going to, help to coordinate safe transitions home and so forth. So it just lets them know what they're going to kind of get out of it. And then I think importantly is this next part that really says to them, okay, so the next steps here are this. And so it breaks down kind of what we saw as the next most kind of imminent steps for someone that's signing on. And that is, that they're going to review and sign the forms that you're going through with them at, right then. And then number two, the next thing, and this doesn't mean it's happening at the same day. It's just letting them know kind of this is what comes next. That there will be a SASH assessment done that, someone from the SASH team, very likely the coordinator or the wellness nurse, is going to notify them to get an assessment completed. And then the healthy living plan is kind of the next thing that is kind of in line after the assessment. So that just gives them a look at kind of the roadmap ahead, so to speak. The next section says fees, and it's giving you an opportunity to make sure they understand that there's no cost to them participating in SASH. That all that the assessment, the ongoing support from the team, the check-ins by the wellness nurse, no cost for that. It does say, however, that if there are some special services that the participant decides that they want, based on let's say they have some issue around foot care, and if there's no regular foot noters program in the area, but they really need foot care, then it could be that you as the SASH coordinator is helping them find out, well, who can do foot care for you? And let's say you're able to find a program that does have a small expense, $10 or something for their feet. That is something they would have to pay for. But again, that choice to do that or not is completely up to them. So it's not that you wouldn't be saying as a SASH coordinator, okay, so you need foot care, so I've signed you up for this, and that costs you $10. I'll take that now, please. It's not like that. It would be, I'm sharing as a SASH coordinator, I'm sharing with you what's available out there, and and by the way, there is a cost to this. So is that something you want to pursue or not? So just trying to make it clear that there could be things that they end up hearing about, from the SASH team that does have a cost to it, but again, it's completely up to them whether or not they choose to pursue that. And then lastly, this explanation of benefits explains again that this is a voluntary program, that it's completely up to them, their participation, that the SASH team will be looking for their input to better meet their needs. If for any reason they want to not continue to participate, all they have to do is contact their SASH coordinator. And then the very last paragraph makes it clear to them that the SASH program is only available because we have this funding through Medicare. So that, of course, the program's continuation is contingent upon this funding continuing. So if for any reason the funding stops, then we would have to stop providing the program. So it's just making sure they understand that. All right, so that's, and again, this is not a form that your participants need to sign, but it's what you want to go through with them from the beginning, because it really kind of lays out what's next. I would leave a copy of this with them. And again, before you meet with them, make sure you have asked them, would you like a family member to be there? Would you like a support person to be there? Because that can be really helpful to really get any questions answered. If they haven't, then leaving a copy is really helpful, because then they can share this with their family members or support persons if they weren't able to be there. Next one I want to go to is, I'm going to go to the authorization for use and disclosure. I'm going a little bit out of order, but that's okay. I find this is the best order to go in when you're signing people up. Okay, so I clicked on that. It downloaded as a Word document. Now I just need to go find it. Here it is. Okay, so this is the authorization for use and disclosure. I think sometimes people understand this form better when I call it a consent, because your participants are consenting to the information sharing between organizations. Again, you want to make note here that this is a fill-in-the-blank type of form, so you want to go ahead and save this. Put it in a folder that you have for SASH participation forms and get your kind of master document set up. So you're going to fill in the name of your SASH site, and then you're going to go down in here and fill in the partner, again, the partner organizations that are part of the collaborative. So again, these are the names you're getting from your memorandum of understanding. So you're filling in here that the SASH partners are, again, name of housing host, home health agency, etc. So what this form is doing is it's giving the participant is giving their permission for the members of the SASH team, which are those partner organizations, to share information amongst each other for particular purposes. And that is what this paragraph identifies. So it says that they, as a SASH participant, are authorizing the SASH partners to use and disclose. So to use means means you're kind of using it internally. So you, as a SASH coordinator, let's say you're looking at the assessment information and you're using it to then come up with some ideas for the participant. So that's you kind of internally using that information. Disclosing it means that you, as a SASH coordinator, you found out that a participant fell, and you know that that participant has worked closely with the case manager from the AAA, so you're going to make sure that that AAA representative knows that Mary fell. So you're disclosing that information. And the only reason you're able to do that is because your participant will have signed this form. So you're going to use or disclose their health information with the following organizations. So it's only the organizations that are listed on this form, so that's important to explain to your potential participant. This is not, open game for you to talk about them at cocktail parties or, when you're at town meeting. It's just sharing of information amongst these particular partners. And it's for the purposes of coordinating care and services, facilitating safe transitions home, developing healthy living plans, community healthy living plans. So it's not only that you're limiting the sharing of information, sharing of their information to these specific partners, but also that you're only sharing around specific things that you're working on together. So that is very important. It's what makes it compliant with federal and state privacy laws and regulations. The federal privacy regulation is called HIPAA, and you will get further training in that. But just understand that these forms are all HIPAA compliant. So you do want to fill in those. You'll see here that there's a blank that needs to be filled in, and this authorization is good for 1 year. And what you want to make sure you do is fill in this blank line the date that they have signed this form, because that will be it lays out then the time frame for when you have to reauthorize. And you'll actually put this date into DocSite, and so DocSite will be able to remind you of that. But you definitely want to put it, write it in here as well, so it's clear to the participant that it's this authorization. We're going to be checking up with them again in a year to make sure they want to continue this. Okay, so then moving on down, again, you just put in here the names of the organizations that make up the SASH partnership. And then you're also, and we actually have just recently updated this form to put a line here where it says, so it says my physician and their staff, so you're going to be putting in what their physician's name is, because you want to make sure that you can share information with their physician, again, in an as-needed basis around these topics. Also, any family member or support person that they want you as part of the SASH team to be able to communicate with. So if there's a situation where they're unexpectedly gone to the hospital, who is it in their family that they want you to be able to make some plans with to help you return home? Who is it? And importantly in this conversation, there may be specific family members that they don't want you to talk about, to share information with. You want to get that as well, and you want to be very clear that it'll only be the family members that they provide you names with that you will be sharing information with. So you want to make sure you get that information clearly written down. Other organizations that this consent allows you to communicate with are discharge planners from the hospitals, nursing and rehabilitation facilities. We also have on here, on this form, we have the UVM Center on Aging and Health Sciences programs. We use a lot of medical nursing students, registered dietitian students. So we added the UVM to our use and disclosure because that has made it much more efficient to utilize students. So depending on where you are, you may want to have UVM on here as well in case you're close enough and able to use some student interns. But you may have a local university that you want to put in instead that has a nursing school maybe. So maybe if you're close to VTC, it might be that there's a partnership there that you could utilize. We also have the Albany College of Pharmacy listed because in the summer we use pharmacy students that come and do community rotation with us here, primarily in Chittenden County, although some in Franklin County, and they help do medication reviews and do educational sessions. So you can add, you can personalize this to your region, I guess is my point. But again, it's completely up to the participant who they want here. The last paragraph here has to do with federal non-discrimination law, Civil Rights Act of 1964. It makes it clear that you have to fill in the blanks here as well, so don't miss this. The housing host organization has to be put in here, has to be clear that that organization does not discriminate based on race, color, national origin, et cetera, et cetera. And then importantly, you need to put in here a name of your housing host staff person and an office address for anybody that has a grievance with how the housing organization is handling information. So in our situation for Cathedral Square, it's our chief operating officer that is listed there. If you don't know who you should list there, you just want to touch base with your supervisor. It shouldn't be you as SASH coordinator or wellness nurse. You need to think of it as, if somebody, a participant is concerned that, some of their information is not being used, hasn't been used correctly, they need to be able to, talk to someone else in the organization. So it usually ends up being a CEO or a COO of the organization, but you will want to touch base with your supervisor on that. This is one of the two forms that needs a signature by your participant. So you'll see that your participant needs to sign and date this, and you will need to witness it as well. So you'll want to have a pen ready. Okay, and this note down here is just reminding you to insert the date that they signed it up in that first paragraph so that you remember that you have to reauthorize this form in a year. Again, we're back in Module 9 here, and you'll see the waiver and release template. Again, you're going to fill in the name of your SASH site, so you want to, again, save this as a master document. And what this waiver and release form is about is it is protecting the organizations that make up the partnership. It's protecting them from lawsuits that a participant might want to bring that at the end of the day had nothing to do with a SASH partner. And what I mean here is that what the first line here is what's so important in this waiver and release statement. It's that your participant understand that SASH is not a healthcare program, that what SASH is doing is not providing their medical care. They're going to continue to see their primary care physician. They're going to continue to go to whatever specialist they're going to. What SASH is doing is bringing together community-based organizations to help them connect better with the healthcare system, to help coordinate that care. But we're not providing medical services as part of our role in SASH. So even though you have a visiting nurse that may very well be part of the SASH team that's meeting once a month, when that SASH nurse, when that home care nurse from your local VNA is sitting at the SASH team meeting, in that capacity, they're not providing direct medical care to any participants. They're acting in a consulting role. Now, the reason that lawyers felt that we needed to have this waiver and release signed by our participants is because they're wanting to make sure that because some of the organizations that are part of the SASH partnership are indeed healthcare organizations such as the Mental Health Agency and the Home Health Agency, because those organizations kind of stand alone, are medical and healthcare providers, we needed to make sure that all the organizations, when they're in their role as SASH partners, that they're protected from liability if something goes wrong in a professional relationship that a participant might have with that organization. And I think the best way for me to explain it is to give you an example. And so an example of this is, so let's say we're at a SASH team meeting and you're talking about a participant that has fallen a lot. So you as the SASH coordinator and you as the wellness nurse have said, I want to talk about Betty because she's fallen a lot recently. And so let's say in the course of this discussion, the VNA nurse that's sitting on the SASH team, who's there for the meeting, says, it'd probably be a good idea for us to offer to the participant to see a physical therapist, to start some physical therapy, because it sounds like this person, is having an issue with strength. So we have that discussion of the SASH team, and then you as the SASH coordinator, you go up and you talk to Betty after the meeting and say, hey, we talked about at the team meeting the fact that you've been falling a lot, and a suggestion that was brought up at the SASH team meeting was that you start to see a physical therapist. Are you interested in doing that? And Betty says, why, yes, that sounds great. So, so then the participant starts seeing the physical therapist, and let's say the physical therapist just happens to be from the Home Health Agency. So the physical therapist goes and meets with the participant, and as I bet you all know, there's always a ton of paperwork that happens when there's the first visit of a physical therapist or an occupational therapist or whoever it is. And what that paperwork is about establishing that that professional relationship between the physical therapist and their organization and the client. So there's a client-provider relationship that is being established, and the client, who just happens to be your SASH participant, is signing paperwork that says, yes, I'm accepting these services of the physical therapist. So let's say that's going on, and a couple weeks go by, and then all of a sudden you hear from the participant that they're in more pain, and they seem to think that they believe it's the physical therapy, that it's the physical therapist, gave them an exercise to do that they shouldn't have done, and so they're talking to an attorney because they feel like the health care bills that they've been having to pay for should really be covered by the organization that hires the physical therapist. So, that's not completely out of the question that could happen. So, by signing this waiver and release, your participant is not signing away their ability to sue or go after that organization that the physical therapist works for. They're not signing away their ability to do that, to sue for damages. What they are doing is holding the other partners to the SASH collaborative. They're holding them harmless. So just, the fact that the SASH coordinator who works for a housing organization was the one that actually suggested to the participant that they get a physical therapist, just because that happened doesn't mean that that housing organization should be held liable for damages that participant may be able to prove or caused by the physical therapy. The Area Agency on Aging, just because they're part of the SASH partnership and we're part of that discussion about suggesting as physical therapists, they shouldn't be held liable for damages that the physical therapist may have caused. So what this form is doing is it's protecting the partners that have come together to work with the participant to stay safely at home. It's protecting them from lawsuits that have nothing to do with what they've agreed to do as part of the SASH partnership. But it's not, and this is important, it's not saying that your participant can't sue an organization that they have a client-provider relationship with. So they can still sue the home care organization based on their client-provider relationship. But they can't go back and try to get damages from all those other organizations. And the truth of the matter is, a good attorney would absolutely try to go after every organization that had anything to do with this decision. That's just, that's what an attorney does. So we have an attorney too, and it was our attorney that said, I want to make sure I'm protecting all of the SASH partnership organizations from that kind of a charge. So, I know that's a little bit confusing, but I think it's important for me to go through that with you because for the most part, you won't get any questions from your participants about this. I think there's been 5 or 6 times that I've gotten a question since we started doing this about this form, which to me actually kind of started feeling like a lot because I was like, oh wow, this is like the 4th time I've had this question. But remember, we have over 4,000 SASH participants. So the chance that you're going to get a question about this is pretty slim. But if you do, I just want you guys to feel confident explaining to your participant, this is not saying you can't sue somebody that you feel like has done you some damage through a relationship you had to provide you health care services. But there is nothing that the SASH partners are going to do in their capacity as SASH partners when they're getting together and talking in a meeting that's going to impact their health. So that's why they're signing this waiver, so they can't go and try to hold every SASH partner organization liable for a separate relationship that a healthcare organization has with them. So, the way and again, you're going to want to, you have your talking points document, so, definitely have that. When I used to do this form with people, the way I explained it to them, I said, the most important thing for you to understand in this document is that SASH is not a healthcare provider. You're going to keep seeing your same doctors, your same specialists, and because we're not providing you health care, you need to agree that you're not going to sue us for medical issues that come up between your relationship with you and a medical provider. SASH isn't providing medical services, so therefore we shouldn't be held liable. So that's really how I explained it, and I never had any questions asked. And again, I think I've had 5 or 6 people raise these questions with me on this form in particular. So I'm just hopeful that that example will help you if it does get raised. And you know, probably most importantly, know that I am available for those kind of questions. And it seems like most of those questions have come up when, and I'm not saying this to be in jest, but it's true. It's been in situations where the participant's either son or daughter is a lawyer and wants to understand more fully. And that's great. That makes perfect sense. So that could absolutely happen. And I've had times where I've had our attorney actually talk to their child who's an attorney, and then you know, we've never had it rescinded. Any questions or thoughts on this one?
I have a question, Betsy. Yeah, on the bottom of the page it says delete paragraph for non-resident participants.
Yeah, it's the very last paragraph. I guess. Oh yeah. So that very last paragraph is saying that the person that signs this is saying that if they choose not to sign this waiver, that they can't participate in SASH. And what we're saying here is, but okay, yeah. So if they choose not to sign this waiver, they understand that they won't be able to participate in SASH, but their privileges or rights that they may have as a resident of a particular housing hub site does not go away. So we wanted to make sure that people understood, you know, just because you read through this and you decide, you know what, I don't want to sign this, that's fine. You're just not going to be able to participate in SASH because we can't hold organizations liable for claims if you're not willing to sign it. But if that doesn't affect any of your rights as a resident of the housing organization. So if you are dealing with participants that are outside in the community, what we call community participants, you want to just delete that paragraph. So if you're going out to meet with someone to sign forms in the community, just delete that paragraph. Does that make sense? Because it just doesn't relate to them. It's only, that last paragraph is only relevant for people that live in your congregate building.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for raising that because I forgot all about it. Okay, so that's the last form that has to be signed. So it's just those 2. And so let's go to the final document, which is called the Notice of Privacy Practices, which all of you are familiar with because for the doctors at all, you sign these things all the time. And ours looks very similar to ones that you sign at your doctor's office. Because again, we're compliant with HIPAA federal regulations. So let's go find this last form. Oops, I went too far. Okay, so it's the 4th one listed here, Notice of Privacy Practices. This does not need a signature, but you should walk through it with your participants. Again, you want to fill in the blank. This one has the county. So whatever county you're in, put that in here, and then again, put the name of your panel here. And yeah, it looks very similar. It's letting your participant know what their rights are. They have the right to get a copy of this notice, to have a clear explanation of it. If they want to see their health record, you know, the information you're putting in DocSite, if they want to see that kind of information, we can absolutely print out pages for them. If they want to file a complaint, if they believe their rights have been violated, they have the right to do that. You know, there's lots of other things here. Under Section B, it spells out our responsibilities to them. So again, you have to fill in the blank here. It says the SASH partners, namely, and then again, insert the names of all your SASH partner organizations here. And it tells them that we are all required by law to maintain the privacy of their health information and in the manner that is spelled out in this notice. We're going to follow the terms of the notice. We're going to notify them if there's been any breach, and that we will not, you know, importantly, that we're not going to share their health information without their authorization. Section C is letting know there are some routine uses and disclosures that are going to happen because of their participation in the program. So we're going to be developing their healthy living plan. So we're going to be, talking to other members of the team about that. So of course we're going to be disclosing some information to develop that. When we're talking to discharge planners at the hospital, if that comes up, of course we're going to be sharing information there. If they want us to help schedule a medical appointment for them, well, obviously we're going to know who their doctor is. So that's just letting them know what are some of the obvious kind of routine uses of their information. Section D is where there are some legally required disclosures. So there could be a time where we're disclosing something actually without their authorization. And these are very kind of extreme, rare situations where you have, a risk to public health. And the Department of Public Health comes in and says, hey, we need to know everybody in this building because there's been an outbreak of, fill in the blank. So there's certain things. There could be an inquiry from law enforcement officials where, if they bring in a written subpoena for information, then of course you have to share that. And we're going to talk a lot more about this at the HIPAA training. But, it's just important to make sure your participants know that we're, under certain circumstances by law, you have to disclose information. And Section E is just letting them know that we'll not be selling their name or information for any purposes for marketing or anything without their explicit permission. How they can, further on, how they can get a copy of their record, which is basically they're contacting the SASH coordinator. And then importantly, Section H, again, you want to fill in some blanks here. You need to know who your privacy officer is from your organization. So if you don't know who that is, you're going to need to ask. And if your supervisor doesn't know, then they're going to need to get a hold of me, and we're going to figure that out. It's normally what I've seen, there's 21 or so housing organizations that are part of SASH. For the most part, it's either the executive director, or it's an assistant director, or it's if there's an IT director, it might be a chief operating officer. It's somebody that's in a leadership position primarily. So, most of you are coming into organizations that have been doing SASH for a while, so it's going to be a pretty simple thing to find out. So you got to fill that in. And then the effective date, so the date that you've given it to them. No signature required here, but what we do ask is that when you reauthorize your participants' use and disclosure every year, that you also share with them the notice of privacy practices, and again, kind of remind them that we are following all of these privacy practices and following HIPAA. It's so important that our participants understand that we take the privacy of their information very seriously. So that's an important thing to do. I would put a copy of this notice of privacy practices up in your office. If you have a bulletin board, put it up there. It should be on your housing host organization's website. I've told all the executive directors that, but if you haven't seen it on there, you could remind them to do that. HIPAA does require that these notices are quite widely available. That is the last form. Any questions about that notice of privacy practices or anything else I've covered so far?
Molly, I have two quick questions.
Yeah, who's this?
This is Rice Hunstra.
Hi.
Hi. The first one is, can you say again what MOU stands for?
So MOU stands for Memorandum of Understanding. And that is, there's a SASH Memorandum of Understanding between all the partners in each region that SASH is part of. So what part of the state are you from?
I'm going to be doing White River Junction.
White River. Okay, so in White River, actually, I know they haven't actually, their MOU isn't fully signed yet, but it's well on its way. So you'll just want to talk to Sarah about that. There is a draft MOU, and it'll have the partners' names. So all the organizations in your region that are participating in SASH are signing off on that MOU, because that's the document that spells out what they're agreeing to do as part of this partnership.
My other question is, does the participant get a copy of each of these forms?
Yes, I would leave them with a copy. Yep.
Okay.
Thanks again for your time, you all.